Welcome to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority's April 22nd meeting, conducted via Zoom, the new verb. It's been a mere 2 months since we met in Temple in February, and no doubt you'd agree that it seems like a lifetime. It really is good to see everyone's faces. You'll see me lean forward because I feel like I should be able to get closer to you. I hope you and your families are all doing well. We have everyone here, I believe, except John Raymond, who is on the board. I think I saw Bruce enter.
I'm here.
There you are.
John's here.
I hope
John.
John's here too, apparently.
Oh, hi,
John
John.
is here.
Sorry.
Hello.
Great. So we're all here. Yay. I hope you've all had a chance to review the minutes of our February meeting. Are there any corrections? If not, could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
A second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you, Jeffrey. Could I ask you to report on the bills paid over the last period?
All right, so we actually have 2 months of bills that we're reporting on because we did not meet in March. So we had our usual expenses, our website and web hosting software, our legal advertisement fees for our legal services and the authority manager. We started the 2-month period with a balance of $122,613 in our bank account. And we finished the 2-month period with a balance of $103,925.23. We are now significantly into our second fiscal year. We have year-to-date interest earnings of $6.31, and the bank account at FNB Bank has been reconciled and is accurate and up to date as of today. Thank you, Audrey.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Well, while we all work to figure out how to function in this new normal, I know we all have a shared appreciation for the work being done by our frontline healthcare workers, our public safety and fire teams, and equally important, an appreciation of all the city staff who make sure services continue for the citizenry of Harrisburg. The city must come through this, and ideally, it will be stronger and more resilient. I know my colleagues and I stand ready to help in any way we can on behalf of the authority. A few quick updates since our last meeting. Fortunately, we weren't able to find a mutually convenient time to reschedule our Economic Development Summit. I say fortunately because that means there are fewer entanglements to get out, as we surely would have had to cancel it. We will revisit it in the fall. In the same way, we will revisit the listening sessions and look forward to working with Nona Watson and Blake Lynch, both with the city, once we assess what life on the other side begins to look like. Unfortunately, we've not been able to meet with the mayor since March 2nd, but we'll continue to try. The mayor has indicated via email that finalizing work on the agreement will necessarily have to wait until after the disaster emergency. Marita Kelly's with us, and I'd like to now yield time to her. As you know, she's the Act 47 coordinator for the city, and on Monday, she submitted her 25th report. It's also noteworthy to know that Marita has been continuing to do all this work, despite the fact that DCED suspended all her contracts for the consulting services she's had up to date. And more than most, and much like us, she'd like to have an agreement executed as soon as possible. Marita, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you very much, Audrey. I appreciate it. I assume everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a nice big booming voice. I do agree. It was a good segue. I guess we all have that same goal in mind to keep the ICA agreement moving forward for a potential adoption by City Council, and we're all eager for that opportunity to occur. One of the things I wanted to discuss was just a summary of, and I don't want to steal Bruce's thunder too much, but just a summary of where we stand fiscally. The most recent check run was run on the 16th of April, and the opening balance on April 12th was $35,211,829, and the ending, this is general fund, the ending general fund on April 16th after the check run and the payroll was $33,948.99. I'm sorry, $948,099, sorry. So that's $33,948,099. So, fortunately, the city is in a good fiscal position in terms of fund balance. We give the leadership at the city a great deal of accolades for that, and I realize it's going to be a tough go in the next several months. So anything I personally can do to work with you and continue to work with both the ICA and of course the mayor and city council, and to move us through this very unusual circumstance with the COVID-19 pandemic, I'll be happy to assist in any way that I can. I did want to give a brief summary on the Neighborhood Service Fund. The Neighborhood Service Fund had a very large check run on the 16th, and the opening balance was $7,459,256, and they had a check run of $707,000 in addition to the $150,000 for the payroll. So that's a pretty hefty check run for the Neighborhood Service Fund. But of course, most of that went to the Lancaster County Solid Waste for $512,000 of it went to Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority. And the closing fund balance on the Neighborhood Service Fund on April 16th, after everything was cleared, was $6,682,245. So that fund, I think, has all of us a little more concerned than the general fund. A lot of activity, a lot of expenditures. And so it's something we probably want to closely keep a watchful eye on. And I'm sure the mayor and the council have been doing that, but I know yourself and myself have also have a responsibility to keep watchful eye on those concerns. So that's where the city stands right now. And again, accolades to those that have been able to maintain a solid fund balance. I noticed the real estate came in fairly normal, considering COVID-19 and the other situations. They had about 65% of it in at the end of March. And, but I know the mayor's primary concern most likely is the earned income tax, much like all the other mayors in the state, and the local services tax. Fortunately, many of us at the state are working from home, so hopefully we're not hit as hard as we thought we could have been, but nonetheless, those two taxes do have us all worried in terms of there being concerns there. The only other items to note, of course, are the concerns with parking. The great loss of parking revenue has us all very concerned. Also, the fact that there will likely be some, well, we don't know what will happen with COVID-19, but there are at least some proposed hikes in parking, which have us concerned somewhat. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was the Lexwama and the great work they've continued to do through this pandemic, but they have had their challenges, as Ms. Sando, the Chief Operating Officer, had mentioned to us, with safety, in terms of having to shut down one-on-one encounters, having to reduce paper that's usually produced as a receipt, things like that. So that's just an indication of all the other industries that have enormous challenges now and in the future, because I do believe the COVID issue is not going to go away in 2020. I think we'll see a revisit of it when the weather gets cold again in the fall. So those are all concerns that I see and I have. Didn't mean to take up too much time, but just wanted to let you know what the Act 47 Recovery Coordinator had to report and the concerns that I have. Thank you very much, Audrey, and thank you to the board.
Thank you, Marita. We really appreciate you bringing us up to date, and we voraciously read your report every time it comes out. I will go ahead and turn it over to Bruce. Would you give us an update, please?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if there's a lot to say at this point. Obviously, the issues are fairly well known, but it's important to frame the situation both from a macro perspective and a micro perspective. When they say this is an unprecedented economic situation, that is not an understatement. Most downturns have been either goods driven, which leads to an oversupply of inventory often, or credit driven, where there's an oversupply of risk essentially, or bad credit. That's what you saw drive the Great Recession in 10 years ago. And this is the first time in modern history, meaning the last 100 years or so, we have a very different economy than we did 100 years ago, where it's a healthcare, public health crisis that's driving an economic crisis, and one that is hitting the hardest in what has always been the actual growth mechanism for other recessions, which is the service side. Most of the time it's manufacturing or goods, whereas they said credit, so people just can't borrow and stimulate economic activity. This time it's hitting the service sector the hardest, the person-to-person activity. And that's important because actually our economy is from a macro perspective at least, that's the majority of it now. It wasn't always the case, but it is now. Having said that, Harrisburg is not representative of the larger economy. We have limited exposure, broadly speaking, to that, unlike many other entities that have seen significant economic growth driven off that. As just an example of our neighbors in Hershey, where, you know, Hershey Park, Hershey Hotel, and the Gardens, and the Giant Center. You know, Harrisburg has its share of, you know, leisure and tourism, but it's somewhat muted, all things being relative. Our economy is fairly diversified. We have large institutional employers, such as what Marita was referring to, the state being one of them, and not just being the Office of Administration under the governor, but there's also the legislature, there's the FIA, PFHA, PSERS. We also have logistics and some manufacturing still, often in the food service side of things. Many of our small businesses are considered essential. The bodegas, the corner stores. We have a grocery store. We have a healthcare facility. We have a university that actually doesn't have a large room and board footprint. So it actually does most of its work remotely already. We have a couple media entities. So obviously this broad crisis is going to hit the city, but it's hard to know exactly how much and how deep until the numbers tell us what it will be. And of course, that drives any decisions on a go-forward basis, both in a current year and future year analysis. Currently, we've seen a few data points that would tell us some things. As mentioned, it's important to note that our discount window where we get the most of our real estate tax revenue did come in fairly close to what it was last year. It's off by about 4%. And I would, it's hard to know if people aren't going to just decide to withhold cash and decided for, to pay in the flat period now that the discount window was waived by city council action earlier in the week. April is, through the first Q, our revenues were quite robust and matched our projections in basically every category. And April is a slow month when it comes to remittances in those areas that Marita referenced, EIT, LST, and even parking, which will represent March revenues, which will be hit, but we are not going to see a full month accrued of the full hit, as activity was still normal through, at least 2 weeks, and maybe some degree 3, depending upon how soon some of the commuting, telecommuting occurred among non-state entities. So we did see hotel tax come in this month. That represented March, and that was about only 2/3 of prior year's March revenues. And we have seen at least a 5% year-over-year decline in total trash tonnage collected and put to the incinerator. And often trash is a sign of economic activity. We haven't seen that show up in the financials yet. So less trash does not mean less revenue, all things being equal. It does help a little bit on the cost side as there's less tonnage being put to the incinerator. Obviously, like anything, we will continue to monitor these things on a go-forward basis, but we're not going to be able to really have a robust analysis of where we're going to be until after Q2, as the LST and EIT remittances are always a quarter and potentially a quarter and a month behind. And my guess is that those entities that would remit on a more timely basis may choose to withhold their remittances until the end, till the last time that they can, just for liquidity and cash flow purposes. We have taken some initiatives to deal with any financial fallout. We have the mayor put on a hiring freeze immediately when the emergency declaration occurred. And we also have furloughed 11 individuals who cannot telework, and their job responsibilities can't be repurposed to something else more productive or useful at the current time. All in terms of our vacancies and the furloughs, represents about 15% of the budgeted workforce in the general fund. So that represents about maybe about a $50,000 per week savings. Also, as you know, construction is kind of been put on hold. Whether that starts up soon, we don't really know how that will work full on based upon the guidance that we get from the governor. But any CapEx project, for us, it's mostly roads, has been deferred to a degree. So there's liquidity savings there in terms of deferment of outlays of cash. And then our healthcare costs, the city is a self-insured, which means that it's not rated. I mean, we don't pay a monthly premium like we actually pay actual costs, and we pay a small fee for a TPA to process all that. And as most healthcare transactions have been slow because of the COVID-19 emergency to essentially only emergency type of procedures, we have seen on a week-over-week basis about a 75% decline in costs. So it's hard to know how long that will be, and obviously there will be some ramp up at some point for those procedures, but in terms of an immediate liquidity and cash flow benefit to the city, that's not insignificant, considering it's could be to the tune of $300,000 to $400,000 a month. Outside of that, we obviously will be watching and monitoring and paying attention very closely, and further policy decisions will be taken as necessary.
Thanks, Bruce. Do any of the board members have any questions that they might want to ask Bruce?
Bruce, the report that you gave, you just mentioned city furloughed 11 employees and there's a hiring freeze. Do you have number of positions that were part of the hiring freeze?
About 38, and that will change if some people may leave.
And that represents 15% of the general fund?
Budgeted employees, if you include the furlough position.
15% of the personnel expenditure?
Not personnel expenditure, budgeted position.
So what would be the impact on the general fund budget on the expenditure
As
side?
I said, probably about $50,000 a week.
50,000 a week. And 75% decline in healthcare costs?
On a week-over-week basis, not in prescriptions, in healthcare.
So do you have any analysis in writing that you've done as to, under the current trends, what that looks like for the expenditure side for the city?
No. You can linearly like play that out, but that seems to be not something that makes a lot of sense, as every month and every week is different. But you know, you could say there could be $1.5 million in personnel to $2 million in personnel expenses, and potentially $2.5 million in healthcare cost savings if you drive that out to December 31st. But that's not a projection you want to rely on, as these things are fluid and circumstances change, obviously.
Would you be able to generate an analysis report, and then something that if you need to update it periodically in the future, is that something you would be able to do?
Maybe I could.
But you haven't done it yet?
I've told you what I've told you.
I think you probably saw the article about Lancaster
Sure.
and what it's going through, and Patrick estimates a 30% decrease in revenue. Would you, would you assume that Harrisburg faces the same? Because unlike Hershey, it's probably a little more driven on the actual revenues of day-to-day business.
Yeah, so I've talked to Patrick extensively. I have weekly meetings with my colleagues in our sister cities, and Lancaster and any city is not the same as Harrisburg. It's a different mix of revenues, a different mix of businesses, and it's a different mix of expenditure and operating environments. For example, the part-time employees that they're laying off, they're laying off 38 or furloughing 38 full and 31 part-time, and the part-timers are all mostly traffic guard crossing. That's not an item that we have in the city. They also have an extensive economic development team, and they are furloughing a lot of them. That's not something that we have either here. And the full-timers are not all being furloughed in the way that was reported. Actually, they're actually having their work hours reduced. So it's a full-time equivalent, but it's not necessarily full-time hours. They're doing that so they can still apply for unemployment compensation and still have some stay on the city payroll, get work done that needs to be done, as well as get healthcare coverage. Also, they have a significant transfer from water and sewer funds to their general fund. They're concerned about that. They also have significant pilot payments, both from F&M and Lancaster General, that are nice. That city doesn't quite have the same exposure to. Pilots are something that we're going to have to look at. But until we know What that's going to be, it's hard to know. And they also have a pretty big exposure to tourism, leisure as well, in terms of what has been a robust economic development, being kind of in the orbit of Philadelphia. They've benefited significantly from, being within a less than an hour drive and a train ride away. So some of both the benefits and the issues that Philly tends to precipitate out, they get caught in that a bit more than we would. But I wouldn't as I wrote in emails, I would say revenue that we have not received, a best worst case scenario would be maybe 15%. But even what anyone is projecting is an unknown. And anyone who says that they know what it is, not, they're all guesses at this point. Obviously we monitor this closely and we'll take action as we need to on a go-forward basis. Lancaster also projected a budget deficit going into the year, which is something that we don't have, and didn't have as much robust fund balance as we do. So from a liquidity perspective, we're a little more in better shape than they are.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Bruce, if a guess would be a 15% decline in certain recurring revenues, and if you're able to do a written analysis, is there anything preventing you from doing that at this time?
That's about, so we have about $66 million in recurring revenue. We've already received 22 million through Q1 through March. So you're at, 44, and then you look at 15%, you get about 6.6. You have about maybe if we play that for the whole year, you get 4 million in savings per the 1.5 and the 2.5 I presented earlier. And then you have a couple $1 million hole, and we have cash for that. We still have an ANDAC agreement that we have not finalized that was going to have fund balance that we've already budgeted for. So we're in a lot better position than I would say potentially many cities right now, at least, that are facing this similar crisis as we are.
So could you convert that to a written report with some sort of pro forma financial statement and send that out to us?
Maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to talk to the mayor about that.
Okay, I'd like to request that you do that, please. It would be nice to see some numbers.
I think it would be useful for us to see that. I think most of us are going through that in our day-to-day business. We're sitting down and we're projecting worst case scenarios so that we're prepared, moderate scenarios and best case scenarios. So I think that would be a reasonable request.
Madam Chairman, I have a question.
Sure. Yes, Kathy.
Bruce, could you address, and I realize all of this is by way of guesstimate at this point, but do you think if we reopen a lot of the businesses within the next couple months that will make any significant impact on the projections that you just shared with us?
The projections are, it's hard to know who's been laid off and how much the fiscal stimulus, the direct support that's been provided, how many have taken advantage of that. I do know that, the banks haven't really laid a lot of people off. The large law firms and lobbyists in the city haven't. It's going to be hard, but I don't know the mix of, the employment mix of our residents. It's hard to know. I think that potentially there is going to be a snapback of activity, but it's going to be hard to know how robust that would be, it's estimates that you get are all over the place, and the economists and other financial people, if you read and watch what goes on, those things change on a daily basis often. This is a unprecedented environment, and so it's very hard to know. And it's like I said, I do think that there will be some businesses that are not going to come back soon, right? So obviously we have a few arts and entertainment entities in the city, Club XL, the Gamut Theater, HMAC. They aren't large, but I'm not sure that we're going to see, live concerts come back very quickly. Considering that even if businesses are all opened up, there's still going to be social distancing, probably requirements, and then just the general population who's not going to want to, be in a very tight quartered space with many other people who they don't know. Hopefully people will come back to restaurants. Once again, we don't have a lot of restaurants with a large footprint. Many of them are small. That can be a good or bad thing, right? So maybe their business hasn't fallen off as much because people still do takeout, but there's going to be social distancing, probably issues for that. So how quickly that comes back, it's hard to know. It's kind of the reason why the mayor and the city with Impact Harrisburg has launched a $1 million grant stabilization, small business stabilization fund to help with that, particularly those types of businesses. Obviously there's going to be some more, we haven't seen it yet, but there's probably going to have to be some large activity from the feds to help state and local governments deal with budget issues. That is going to, I think, be also unprecedented, even more than it already is. And we shall see how that occurs. It may not happen for a few months. I know McConnell said he wants to wait till the full Senate is in session to start talking about that. So at a minimum, that won't be till the beginning of May. But there's obviously a lot of pressure to facilitate something of that nature beyond what the federal government, the Fed Reserve has already done.
Yeah. One more, if you will. What kind of an impact do you see from the cancellation of the senator season?
Yeah, obviously, it hasn't been canceled yet. I don't see how that probably will occur, unfortunately.
I'll reword and say anticipated cancellation.
Yeah. We are going to have to, pick up the payments in rent that they're not going to make. That will be the biggest effect on the city directly. It will have some spin-off effects on some of the, businesses that get traffic from day game, from games. The city, they pay a bit of amusement tax, but it's not as large as, say, the farm show or the outdoor show, which we got kind of lucky with in that they already occurred before the COVID crisis hit. So there'll be effects, but it's not as great as it could be, I guess. I think it's going to affect the people that work there and the people who and just the enjoyment that fans get from attending the games more than anything.
Thank you.
What about the Neighborhood Services Fund? What are the impacts that are potential there? What's it sensitive to, or is it sensitive to non-payment?
If people don't pay their trash bills, that's about what the issue is. So far, so good. We'll see.
Any other questions? If
I have Madam Chairperson, I have a question or two for Bruce.
all right, if we can just keep them tight and so we can keep
You know,
moving on the
Bruce
agenda.
already answered my first question, which is that if the senator's season is canceled, I assume they would not be making rent payment on the facility. So you already answered that. I wasn't sure if it was a guaranteed rent or optional. Okay. That was the first question. The second question was, I heard Marita talk a little bit before about parking revenue may or may not be seriously affected by the downturn. Obviously, we don't know. But if it is, I assume that scheme that was worked out is somewhat predicated on a certain level of parking revenue that has to come in every year. And obviously, if it doesn't, then there could be theoretically some sort of negative impact from that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that affects us. There's no question that I would say in terms of a large chunk of expected revenue, that I would say is our single biggest exposure because it was structured that way. Once again, though, this year was the first year that the payments were much less than they had been in prior years. So we didn't budget for something that we weren't expected to get statutorily or contractually. But, that's obviously, and that's an issue everywhere, right? I mean, and the truth is that could be, that could be an impaired asset on a go-forward basis, depending upon the structure of how we work in this country. But, that gets into a lot more other scenarios that it's too soon to look at. And it's somewhat out of our control as it is a third party that has to deal with the bonds that were floated, that were backed by the revenues that luckily the city is not a guarantor for, but instead the state and the county is.
Yeah. Good. So, and then my third point is very similar. It has to do with the incinerator arrangement, which was also a scheme that was worked out, which was really complicated. And I realize that you already said that the biggest effect that you might see is if trash quantities drop, which is a possibility if there's an economic downturn, you might actually save money because you'd have less tipping fees. And I understand that. But the other question is if the new owners of the facility realize significantly less revenue, does that have any potential impact on the finances of the city, or are you completely separated from that?
Well, I mean, we have a put or pay, right? So if it falls below 35,000 tons a year, we have to pay the difference. We've been above 38,000 a year, where we actually get a rebate. So, there is some financial, but we budgeted, what we, even what we paid last year plus a CPI number. So, that it doesn't have a direct appropriation effect. It could have a budget effect, but it's still a little too soon to know what that's all in it's going to be.
Good. Excellent. Thank you very much, Bruce. I appreciate the information. Audrey, those are the only questions I have.
Any others? If not, we'll turn to the next agenda item, which is our Section 203 report, which comes due in a week. And as you may remember, we discussed this in January. We reviewed sort of the topics or the chapters that we'd like to see in this report. And there are several moving parts to pulling this all together, but they will come to Jeffrey. And I'm hoping that he can consolidate them and before or by the end of the weekend, by the end of the week, beginning of the weekend, we'll be able to have a draft for the board members so that you can review it, provide feedback, and then he will integrate these, and then he will send back out the final so that everyone can take a look at it before we submit it to the General Assembly. Work's been, we've pulled pieces together. We know the city's been busy and was not able to lend as much help as we might have called on. The report itself contains some financials that we've pulled, but it more importantly calls for a narrative explaining the progress of the city meeting its annual budgets, an appraisal of the progress, and the extent to which the city's making a good faith effort. As it's completed, obviously it'll be available on the website. And Ralph, been an amazing architect of this. Is there anything that I've missed?
I don't think so, Madam Chair. It was helpful. Thanks, Jeffrey, for kicking it off and putting together the the initial several pages of content for us to begin to compile the report. If I may, I'd like to make a motion here so that we can get the report submitted on time.
Wonderful.
And if I need help wording this, Jeffrey, perhaps you can help correct me if I need to word this differently. I would like to make the motion to authorize our chairperson Audrey to sign the report, and to Jeffrey to help compile the report and help finalize it so that Audrey can submit it on time. And if need be, we can. If there's information that's missing, specifically some of the contractual information from the city that we may not have been able to compile, that we could supplement the report in the future by addendum.
And would you be willing to add to your motion and further that you would allow a distribution of the draft document to the authority members to allow them an opportunity to review and offer comments prior to its submission to the state?
Certainly, that could be part of your process while you compile it for us.
Okay. So that'll
I'd be happy to second that motion.
Any other comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Thanks for wording that, Ralph and Jeffrey.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Next on the agenda is the city's financial plan, which yesterday I received an email request from the mayor relative to extending the 5-year financial plan update. I will read the section from the email. It says, speaking with our team, there's consensus that given the economic uncertainty of the current pandemic, we won't be able to make the decent financial projections until the end of the third quarter at the earliest. So the city hereby requests an extension of the 5-year plan submission until October 31st, 2020. And as referenced before we talk about it, I just wanted to remind everyone, originally the deadline was the end of the calendar year, and we extended that permanently in accepting the mayor's proposal to always be April 30th going forward. I think that's the only detail I'd want to add, and would like to open it up for discussion so that we can respond to the mayor's request.
This would require a motion and a second and approval of the extension by the board.
Right. I mean, from my perspective, I certainly appreciate the fact that it will take some time to get these numbers in a satisfactory format, but it seems a long time to go without any kind of projections. And I'm sorry, Bruce, I know you're shaking your head, but I do think it's a long time to go without having this, when in fact numbers can be revised, they can be reconsidered, they can be reevaluated. And so
That's just
I would
not
like
accurate. We're not going to see until we get real numbers. All you're doing is doing busy work. And the fact is that until we get a sense of where we're going to be, which would be somewhere around August at the earliest, but that is just for the current year. The future year, that's when we have to then put policy into place in terms of how we budget. And we're not going to have a full sense of that until we get into September and to October.
And sorry, and I appreciate that. It's that we are moving through cycles. We are moving through the budget. We are moving through revised projections every day. And I'm just saying that if indeed we were going to grant the extension, my suggestion would be that we need some sort of interim reporting that takes place and gets revised, because otherwise we will have 10 months of this year gone before we're actually able to look at what was the current year and projecting it into the future.
Yeah, you won't be able to do any projections till later in the year. It just won't make any sense. And I think if you talk to anyone who has some understanding of how this works, that's just the truth of the matter. All you're doing is coming up with numbers that don't mean anything, which doesn't provide any useful information. We obviously are going to be monitoring current year issues on a daily basis. And we have enough. I don't think we're going to have a liquidity issue, which is what you have to worry about in the current year. Future year, you have to really, deal with what is going to be projected on a go-forward basis. Once you have real information about what the parking situation is going to be, what really is the fallout in real time of the EIT and LST, what type of bounce back we do or do not get once some of this crisis abates, what type of stimulus help is provided, and how that looks and what form it takes. It just, future projections don't mean anything right now.
Audrey, I concur with you generally. I just think that if the next 6 months go by and the city's operating under the financial plan from like May or whatever of 2019, I just think there needs to be a plan for the next 6 months. Obviously, the city's presumably operating under some sort of budget, right? Under some sort of budget and expense controls and revenue expectations.
And that's what we're going to do. And projections don't change that, no matter what you think or what Audrey thinks.
So I think it would be appropriate to have a plan in place for the next few months as in an interim situation, understanding that it'll be a plan for the emergency period. I don't think, I would concur with Bruce, but I don't think it's possible to make a very valid 5-year projection, under normal, stable circumstances. But, you maybe could infer from some of my question, I think there needs to be, written financial analysis and needs to be in place, and we should be able to watch it to see if assumptions are playing out, and if they're not, then adjust them on a regular and periodic basis.
That's your opinion, and you're not here to make policy. You're not here to make policy. That's what the mayor and the elected officials are here to do. And we will adopt policy as needed, obviously.
And I don't think anyone was suggesting that we make policy. It's just that we'd like to, as we are charged with taking a look at the city's finances and making sure that all reasonable activities, that everything is taking its course relative to the budget, that we're staying steady as much as we can. So I understand that you respectfully disagree, Bruce.
Strongly disagree.
Jeffrey.
Can I make a suggestion? I don't think that what board members are saying is that far apart. I think that the mayor's request is reasonable. He's not going to be able to have the time to put together the report as we saw last year until October 31st. I think it's reasonable. That report does take a heavy lift to get done. On the other hand, I think that the comments from the chair and the vice chair about needing interim reporting and numbers is reasonable as well. And I think that if you combine those in the same motion and, for example, grant the mayor's request, but add to it a caveat that the authority would love to see interim numbers as soon as possible so that they can track the progress over the course of the year, then Bruce will do whatever he can do with the authority of the mayor to allow him to put together in the time and data available. So I think you're probably both correct, and you could probably combine that in one motion.
Yes, Doug.
And I agree with that strategy because
Doug, I can't hear you. It's Kathy.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm on a microphone, on a inline mic. So anyhow, no, I am completely sympathetic to the argument that we have a delay in doing the 5-year projection because there's the first issue of working our way through this year, and then beyond that, as Bruce suggests, and I think the mayor in his original request, we're going to have a different new normal to deal with. And that's going to be a multiple set of factors, including what the effects are at the state and federal level. And I mean, we've talked optimistically about additional federal money, but I think we have to look at the other side of it as well, because if the General Assembly is looking at a $4 billion hole of its own, quite often that falls to the local level in decreased state appropriations. And our General Assembly, from my personal experience in my prior career, isn't all that good in restoring funding that it cuts to meet a shorter term deficit. And so I think we will need to get past the state budget adoption process, and we will have to get a little bit better into whatever our economy is going to be for us to be able to do meaningful projections going forward. Now, all that said, though, I also agree with the point that we are charged by the General Assembly with paying attention to where the city's finances are, and recognizing that, Bruce, you're doing a week over week or month over month readjustment of your projections. We just want to be party to that and have an understanding of where we are, so that we have the same knowledge base that we have the knowledge base that the legislature and legislation expects us to have.
Thank you, everyone. Jeffrey proposed that someone make a motion. Does someone want to take a stab at that? And
I might ask a question for Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce, how much time does it take you to put together a placeholder projection or a placeholder budget for the next 6 months?
I'm not doing a new budget. I mean, I don't know what you're asking. Are we getting real numbers? We'll get real numbers. We're just not, that's not our job. I can look at projections and you can do linear estimates, but you're not getting any, you won't get any data after we get it.
Well, for example, you said that you have a hiring freeze. That would be an example of something that you could have in your plan that we could monitor for the next few months.
Okay.
Right now, we're operating off the 2020 budget that was approved, right?
And that budget has not changed.
And we're operating off the financial plan for 2019. But your, excuse me, but
that's the government document.
Okay, excuse me, but you're describing.
Sorry, Ralph has the floor. Please let Ralph finish first.
But you're describing some initiatives that have been taken, such as a hiring freeze, such as the furlough of 11 employees, and a slowdown in purchasing and capital expenditures, an immediate reduction in healthcare costs. These are all things that would be appropriate for us to monitor in a written format as an interim plan.
There's nothing to monitor because they're projections. I wouldn't want to codify that because they're not guaranteed. That could change.
Okay, well.
It could change
okay.
Tomorrow, obviously. I can put some higher level numbers together, which I kind of already went over. That's not a big deal, but we're not changing the budget at this point. Obviously, there will be some.
I guess I'm challenged to understand your resistance
to do that. There's no resistance. I'm just I'm just trying to provide something that's actually actionable and reasonable and workable versus stuff that has no ultimate meaning. And we're not changing the budget. The budget is the budget at this time. We're not reopening it. So the appropriation is where it is, and we will be doing reallocations legislatively as we have to address issues that come up. Obviously, we have no data at this point that can point to any firm reduction in revenues or expenditures. Once we get that data, then I do think it is important to put together some future-looking projections. We are not at that point yet.
Okay, well, you said 66 million, 22 million, 6.6 million at 15%. These are all examples. These are all, I understand.
I mean,
I understand how, I understand. Well, all of us all of us use assumptions in business analysis. So I don't understand the resistance to putting that in the form of an interim plan, something that we can look at, something that we can monitor.
Nothing to monitor.
Well,
But I can put together some high-level date numbers for you. That's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, you get to pick the format. So if you choose,
I'm not. There's no purpose to get granular. Once we have real numbers, then I do think that it is incumbent upon the city to project forward, even in the current year. But we're not quite there yet.
And so I'd like to get a motion on the floor. I would also like to say, Bruce, that we take this very seriously. And this is our responsibility. This is a mandate. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for us to request what is going on in every city, town, business. Everyone is sitting down and saying, what kind of an impact is this going to have? And how will I respond to make sure that my entity, my business, knows its path forward?
And you do that when you have the numbers.
I will stop there, and I would like to entertain a motion that puts this the delay in place for this year only, not for FY21, and makes an accommodation for interim reporting so that we can be aware and be involved in monitoring what's going on. Anyone take a stab at that, or can we rewrite that into a motion? Can I make a motion? So,
shall I take a stab at it?
yes, please, Ralph.
This is my thinking on it. Maybe before it's in the form of a motion, maybe I can do a quick straw poll to see if this wording makes sense. That the 5-year financial plan, an informal way to put it would be like the serious version of the plan that includes the meaningful projections that that we really feel are actionable. That although that would be deferred for a period of time, that we would have in a very short order an interim financial plan, something that we could be watching and updating as frequently as need be, and that would demonstrate to us that Bruce and his department are exercising good, competent financial management, keeping an eye over the
good, competent financial
keeping an eye over the revenue receipts and the expenditures. So I would love to see an interim plan in the meanwhile. It's an interim budget management plan. I don't know if you can think of a better way to word that, but something that we could receive as a report, because obviously if they have a hiring freeze and furloughs and medical expense savings, we're not going to see results line up with the budget that was approved recently. So I'd like to see something that is more correspondent to the results that we'll be observing over the coming weeks and months.
And
with all due respect, that's not a great motion. That's a great point that you made.
Yeah.
Not a form of emotion. Yeah, it's too long.
so how about a motion that says that the authority, I move that the authority extend the 5-year financial plan revision that is submitted to the General Assembly is delayed until October 31st of 2020, and that in the interim, the city will provide to the ICA ongoing updates to circumstances of the pandemic on the budget. I lost it there, sorry.
Yeah, and further that the city will provide as available updated data on the current financial circumstances, something like that.
Well, I would
Leave
like
it
to,
in hand.
not as, I would say a certain time period, at least quarterly, at least whatever. I know Doug
I
has
think you're going to have to
a resolution in. You're cutting out,
I'll second the
Jeffrey.
motion. I'll second the motion for discussion purposes, and then just for further clarity, my understanding is what we're saying is to keep us apprised as fiscal circumstances change through the course of the next several months, in whatever reporting format is suitable, but so that we have knowledge of the city's financial position and where we anticipate it heading, and so we can develop as on our own a curve on where we project finishing out the current fiscal year.
I think that's good. We could take Audrey's start and Doug's end and make that one motion.
As long as there's specifics in there for the updated.
We will make sure.
All
We'll
right.
make sure it's in the minutes as well. All this will be in the minutes of the meeting as well. So the motion was made by Chairperson Carter and seconded by Member Hill.
And as much as any of us can understand that, are there any other questions? If not, all those in favor?
I'll give my comments here if Doug's opening it up for comment.
Yes. Sorry.
And this comment is, let me see if this leads to the possibility of amending the motion to either to make it more clear or maybe at least to satisfy my concerns. I would love to have what we would call an interim financial plan. And that interim plan could be, updated after a week or after 30 days. But I would love to have an interim financial plan that we could receive in writing. I think, we've seen the format of the initial 5-year plan. And I believe there should be some sort of plan that's a document that we can refer to as this is, the current operating procedures, and these are the initiatives that are, being taken, and these are the current, high-level estimates that we're estimating and planning for, worst-case scenarios, if you will. So that's my explanation for what I'm looking for, but I'm really looking for an interim financial plan to tide us over until things come back to normal, and then we can take the long-term view again for the future and for the 5 years and for the financial stability and the recovery of the city.
And so, Jeffrey, can you annotate the motion in your notes? And do we have any other comments?
Madam Chairman, I agree with Jeff Stonehill's comment earlier that I'm not sure we're really all that far apart. I would like to vote for the motion to extend the 5-year for the October 31st, 2020 deadline so that the city has the opportunity to get a better handle on what I think we all consider to be a very, very unwieldy situation. My concern, which I think is shared by most of the other members of this board, is that the policy has already been made. The legislature has said that we have to have these plans, and that is the legislative policy that is embodied in the statute. And in order to do that, we need to have some ongoing updates, I would hope in advance of each of our meetings, of any significant changes. And I would defer to Bruce on what those significant changes are. But in order to perform our responsibilities, I think we need more information, and we've got to be in the loop on that information on an ongoing basis. So I feel for what Ralph is saying in terms of businesses are doing this all the time. We're turning on less than a dime at this point because of all the changes that are out there. But we've got to be in this loop somehow if we're going to defer this date. That's my personal view. And as I say, I think it's shared by a number of people that are board members as well. I would like to be able to vote for an extension, but only if I know that we as ICA members are going to be informed of significant changes kind of as they occur. And it can be fairly informal, but I want the information. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So I think we have wording, annotated wording that in essence grants the extension, but requests updates at time certain and assumptions, projections going forward.
That's a motion and second on the floor. Yes.
Okay, so we've had a first, a second. Do we need another on the amended? We're all good? All those in favor?
Not all, well, I'll just say that unless in the interim we're having an interim plan, I wouldn't support this motion as is, personally.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Rob?
My personal feeling about this is that if we don't have an interim financial plan, that otherwise we're operating under the old financial plan currently. And to me, I don't think that's responsible. So for me, I wouldn't support an extension without an interim financial plan. And for the next, whether it's 6 months, that's fine with me. I'm not personally, I'm sympathetic, and I don't think that it makes sense to have projections for years 2 through 5 right now. But for the short term, I think it's important to have a plan, and I think that plan needs to be in writing, and that would be where I would be. So that's why I wouldn't support them. I wouldn't support the current motion without an interim plan in place.
So, Madam Chair, just as a point of parliamentary procedure, I think we just need a motion to call the question and vote. Either vote on what's been put forth, or perhaps make another motion. But I think the motion and the second's out there.
Okay.
Would you like me to offer it by way of an amendment?
Can we have at least a repeat on the motion, and then we can see if we need to amend?
Right. So let's restate the motion, which is that we approve the extension for FY20, but we also request a financial plan update for the current year.
Be provided.
Add something there
Be provided
to be provided
by the city. That's it.
by the city. Does that,
And all the commentary will be in the minute.
are there, so that motion, new motion is now on the floor.
Doug, are you
Do I have-
okay with that limited motion? You were the second on it.
Well, I'm still of the point of view that this is going to be changing on a month-over-month basis, if not more frequently. And so I'm less insistent on it being a formal report, but rather a clear and clean means of communication. And as Kathy suggested, numbers in advance of the meetings would be particularly helpful so we can have meaningful discussions and ask questions.
Just for clarification, that is the motion. The motion was
Good, thank you.
from Audrey was the postponement of the deadline to October 31st, and then the request in detail is as Doug has said, not a formal plan as Ralph had requested, but rather information on an ongoing basis as things happen in a format to be provided by the city, hopefully in advance of future authority meetings. So that is the motion in second on the floor.
That's correct.
Okay. That's the question to be
And
called.
Jeff, point of clarification, is it a request for, or is it a requirement for ongoing financial information?
My understanding is it's a request.
I would probably defer and say we need it. We can't go without it.
No.
I think, how about we negotiate the format? You and Bruce can come together and figure out a format that we can get this information in monthly, quarterly, but something that has to be updated. I'm sorry, there are so many balls in the air with this pandemic that we want to see a nimble city taking into account what's happening on the landscape and the impacts that are being felt. So anyway, I'll step back.
I think the point has been made, Madam Chairperson, but I think that we have to pass a motion, and we can continue to work with the city and the partnership that we always have, but I think we need to proceed past this deadline.
I think the question was whether it is requested or required.
Right. And Doug, I think that really goes to Doug's the second on it, and Doug said he would like it. I don't know, Doug, is it requested or required?
Well, hoping isn't ever a good strategy. And I know Bruce is actually developing numbers. And so, yes, please, yes, share with us the numbers.
Required, not requested. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Required.
So we've got a motion.
Yeah.
Can I have a second?
Yes, Doug is the second.
So is it open for amendment?
Right.
I would propose to amend the motion so that the extension be approved subject to an interim financial plan to be submitted in a timely manner prior to our next board meeting. And what you're saying is the required submission of information would really be the interim financial plan. And I'll say by way of commentary, I don't believe an interim plan needs to have hard, fast numbers. I think it's fine for the interim plan to describe steps that the city is taking, has taken under consideration that it may take, and that the city would have the option to update its interim plan on a monthly basis if it so chose. Have maximum flexibility to respond to the crisis. And then the last thing I would add by commentary is, like I said, I'm really challenged to understand the resistance to providing a written plan or a written report. And I do think that would be, it would behoove us all to have it. I think that would give us confidence that we're exercising prudent management in times of crisis. So that's my commentary and reason for the amendment that I propose.
Back to Audrey, would you like to accept Ralph's amendment that the form of the report be an interim plan?
Yes.
And Doug, would you like the form of the report to be an interim plan?
Well, I think we're dancing on the head of a semantic pin here. The information that we're asking is elemental to a plan. Procedurally, whether it's put down, how it's formatted on a piece of paper, and whether it says plan at the top or not, I think is almost immaterial. Really, all I'm looking for are numbers, so I know current position, and I know that the city's taking those into account and making reasonable projections of where it's going to be coming and how the curve is changing through the course of the year. So I don't know that it's necessarily when I consider the term financial plan, I'm thinking more of a larger document with more permanence, and this is a more flexible situation we find ourselves in right now. So that's why I'm kind of on that semantic bubble, I suppose. And so I don't know if Ralph has any further clarification on that point, or.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a matter of semantics. It certainly wouldn't be subject. An interim plan would not be subject to the requirements of the Act and all the the hefty projections and assumptions, and state the basis for assumptions that are made. But in time of crisis, I think it would be appropriate for us to have a written report, and that should be some sort of interim reporting that takes place, understanding the city's not currently abiding by the old plan that was approved last year or the 2020 budget, right? There's sort of evasive maneuvers taking place. And I mean, I'd be pleased if there was every month, if Bruce could update us on how things are shaken out. And so I think the use of this, what I'm asking for as an interim plan is not hard projections that have to be met, but really a plan and reports that, as Doug, as you described, plan and reports that apprise us of how the results are shaking out and against a benchmark that we can observe.
And so I think, Jeffrey, if you can pull
Yeah,
us,
I
in
think
here,
those last-
I think we've got a report plan.
Yeah, I think that Ralph's last comments were the point there. A plan and a performance review of the actions the city has taken in the interim.
All right.
I'd be happy to call it an interim plan that does not meet the stringent requirements of the act. It does not meet the, the spelling of the act, but a plan that is flexible and in the city's best estimates as to, what the format and content of the plan is, as long as it's there and submitted to us.
Well, what you get will eventually be for you all to decide whether it's sufficient. So I think that we
Right.
ultimately, you pass the motion and then you see what you get from the city.
Well, I think we can share that. We can work out the points amongst, to figure out exactly what we want in this report plan. So where do we stand? Do we have a motion on the floor?
Yes, we do. We have a motion from Carter and a second from Hill and lots of clarification.
Any other comment? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Did we hear everyone? All
Yeah,
those
any
opposed? Sorry, opposed? It
No.
passes.
Unanimous.
Well, that was a lively conversation. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that because it's important that the authority members feel comfortable that we know what's going on. So I appreciate the time that took, but I think it was worth it. We have other business on the agenda, and before I do that, I wanted to just turn it over to Doug to make there are 2 activities that you helped charge, and I'd like to hear about them.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chairperson. 2 things. One is on our request for some econometric study by the Independent Fiscal Office, and then the second is relative to Impact Harrisburg and a partnership it has entered into with the city for some small business grants going forward. So on the IFO, I sent around information to the board a little while back, talking about the Independent Fiscal Office and the services it provides statutorily for the Commonwealth in assisting the Commonwealth in monitoring its fiscal capacity during the year, and then has specific benchmarks that it meets in providing revenue and expense projections from an independent basis as the Commonwealth approaches adoption of the budget for the coming fiscal year. So, for example, their next fiscal analysis is due to the state the last week in May. The IFO also does analyses from time to time on other fiscal matters for state and local governments. So by way of example, they've done a series of reports on local property tax and its impact and local reliance on it. And on that basis, the IFO, either of its own volition or by request, can take on other studies. And what prompted this was the report that was furnished to the board that the IFO did on its first set of projections on the state fiscal impact of the COVID crisis, noting here's what happens if businesses return at the end of April, and then second alternative returns at the end of May, and then with further caveat that they'd probably do updated projections to each of those. And at my suggestion, Chairperson Carter sent a letter to Senator DeSanto and to Representative Kim asking that they put a request in with the Independent Fiscal Office to do a COVID study on behalf of local government, not on behalf of the city specifically, but on behalf of local government, which is something in their wheelhouse, divided into 3 parts: 1 impact on municipalities, 1 impact on counties, and 1 impact on school districts. And that gets to some of the issues that we've already been talking about, that each of those classes of government, local government, have different tax bases that they rely on, different local fee structures, different service requirements, different levels of dependency on state and federal appropriations and pass-throughs. And so although it isn't micro applicable to us, at least could help give us some additional data points that we can look at going forward. I also shared the request with the other local government associations, and I've been told that they are or are about to submit their own request. Their request, I believe, will go through the chairs of the local government committees in the House and the Senate. So just to bring you up to date on that. Madam Chairperson, any questions on that point?
Any questions from anyone? I mean, Doug drove it all, and it was great, and I hope something comes of it, because any of these sorts of information gathering initiatives help all of us. Any other questions?
Thank you. The Independent Fiscal Office is kind of Pennsylvania's counterpart to the Congressional Budget Office. So it does independent scoring, and it's been in existence for about 10 years, has an excellent reputation on the econometrics work that it's been doing. So,
Thanks, Doug.
okay. Second, and I'm happy to see the mayor on the call. I'm also on the board, as is Neil Grover, of the Impact Harrisburg, which is the nonprofit that was created out of the Harrisburg Strong Plan to administer some infrastructure and economic development funds that were left over from all of those recovery transactions. We have a couple million left in the kitty after our first round of grants to local business entities and others. And an idea that was proposed to us was to put together a grant program for the smallest businesses in the city. And we approached the city and the mayor and then Council President Williams. Both were very enthusiastic about it and have agreed to commit city funds as well. So at this point, we are calling it the Neighborhood Business Stabilization Program. It will make available to businesses with gross income of $1 million or less, grants of up to $10,000 that they can use for transitional expenses as they work their way through the COVID crisis. And it can be used for mortgage, for rent, for payment of suppliers, and for personnel costs. Half of the money that's going to be available will be targeted at the smallest businesses, those with gross income of under $500,000. It's going to be on an application process. City Council took it up at its work session last night and has scheduled for final action at their legislative meeting next week. But in the interim, their response was enthusiastic as well. And so Impact is going to be announcing the program. Tentative announcement date is this coming Friday. And the application process will be available online, as well as download a PDF and available on our website as well as on the city website. The Impact Harrisburg is committing $500,000. The city is matching that with another $500,000. The whole program will be administered by Impact Harrisburg. Mayor, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add, or if anyone has any questions, or Neil, if you have anything that you want to add as chairman of the Impact Board.
I can add briefly that it's actually opening on Friday, and you're receiving applications starting Friday. We're going to be doing a full court media press over the next 2 days. We've got a press release going out. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live event on Friday. The city is also sending a letter to every licensed business in the city, inviting them to apply if they've been impacted by this health emergency. So our goal is to make sure that every business knows about it and is able to take advantage of it by filling out an application. And we worked very well with Impact Harrisburg, very closely. Nona Watson in our office and Sheila Dowford, along with input from others, really put together, I think, a strong application process. And this is going to be, I think, a model potentially for other cities moving forward.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Doug. And it certainly is going to present a lifeline for a lot of the businesses that are barely holding on by string at this point. Is there any other business that any of the board members would like to bring up?
I could just, if I could just have the floor for a second, Audrey. I know that I brought to everybody's attention my involvement in the Government Affairs and Policy Committee on the federal level. And I think it was mentioned earlier that the recent federal legislation that was agreed upon last night does not include any state or local funding assistance. And I'm sure that everybody on this call is very concerned that future federal legislation in some way includes assistance for the local governments. And I want you all to know that I am working as part of my group to try to encourage that, as are other Pennsylvania local government advocates, including the GFOA and PML and others, are working really to lend their voice to our federal delegation to let them know that local government in Pennsylvania and throughout the country really needs assistance in any future legislation. So I think if we could all sing from the same sheet of music, that would be a positive thing going forward. And I'm sure everybody agrees on this call with that general idea.
Great, thank you. With that, I'd like to open it up for public comment. I think, Jeffrey, you have comments that you are going to read.
I do not, and I'm going to pause a second to see if anybody is
Has chatted with you?
What's that?
Has chatted with you?
Nobody has chatted with me.
Well, then I think that speaks volume of perhaps there are no public comments today.
No, I'm sorry, I have one.
Brian.
Yeah, Brian came in with Rock the Capital. I just have one about the litigation. I see after this session, you're going to go into an executive session for litigation. I was just wondering if you had any updates on that and how that's going to affect your relationship with the city and your different projects like the Economic Summit going forward. Because I know at the last meeting, there was some controversy around that.
I don't know I don't believe we have a litigation update on the agenda, and I don't believe we're offering any update on the litigation in the public portion of this meeting. I will point out that Chairperson Carter signified at the beginning that we never did actually schedule the Economic Development Symposium. So that is currently on hold until after the health crisis ends, hopefully later in the year.
Okay, that was it for me.
Okay, good.
At this point, then, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn the public portion of this meeting and move into an executive session wherein we will discuss the potential litigation.
And I will, at this point, terminate the recording of the meeting. This is the end of the public session.
And I would ask that everyone but the board members please exit the meeting, or Jeffrey will have to use his power of the button. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe.